Frank Sinatra, an astrological portrait by Ciro Discepolo. There's a shadow over Frank Sinatra's past. His alleged ties to the mafia, never fully proven but never 100% denied either. If it weren't for this, many would see him as a human role model. 72 years of essentially good health, enormous success, inimitable singing ability, great reciprocated loves, abundant money, comfort and privilege, personal power, including political power, and admiration earned through 35mm film and charitable work. What more could one want from life from a Western perspective? Of course, if you're a Tibetan, one of those orange-skinned people who live in the world's most isolated monasteries immersed in prayer, eating a bowl of rice a day, then ours isn't a great example of the good life. But for all those between Western Europe and the American Pacific coast, Frank is Frank. One, great, inimitable, unique. Sinatra is a Sagittarius, and it's no coincidence that he's in the spotlight today, and has been for the past few months. First Uranus and then Saturn are transiting his natal sun at 19 degrees 13 minutes and 8 seconds in the 9th sign of the zodiac. It's an eventful period, even quite dangerous for him, which, given his age, tends to express itself primarily in a pathological sense. Last November 9th, he underwent emergency surgery at the Eisenhower Medical Center in Palm Springs, California, following yet another bout of pain. Doctors announced he had diverticulitis, having removed part of his intestine. Until a few hours earlier, the legendary Blue Eyes had been performing at the Golden Nugget Casino, the most renowned in Las Vegas. But immediately after the show, pale and sweaty, Frank collapsed into a chair backstage and was immediately rushed to the Palm Springs Medical Center. The surgery, according to the surgeons who operated on him, is unlikely to have any consequences, but the severe transits he's facing suggest complications, or at least other physical problems. Naturally, there's also a financial impact, given the failed contracts and the transits of Saturn and Uranus in his second house. But for a man as wealthy as him, and of his age, disharmonious transits primarily mean health problems. It should be noted, as always, that Saturn transits don't necessarily mean misfortune and blah blah blah. But for those who hate demagoguery and call facts by their name, a Saturn transit over the Sun in sesquisquare Neptune and square Jupiter is a serious event at 72 years of age, very serious. Even the solar return is quite negative, showing a stellium, Sun, Uranus, and Neptune, in the 12th house. In this chart, Mars is conjunct Jupiter in the second sector, which suggests many and significant expenses. Jupiter is also lord of the 12th house in the second, which means hospitalizations and various recovery costs. However, the immense financial fortunes of the voice are not in danger. Back in 1964, his earnings were calculated at $20 million a year, based on a capital of over $300 million. Today, the figures are much higher. Sinatra Enterprises encompasses the goldmine of records, music publishing, film credits, and ownership of radio and television stations. So, Saturn moving into the second house doesn't produce the same result as for a poor mortal like the rest of us. For him, give or take $1 million, it's still a Scrooge McDuck fortune. But it wasn't always this way. Sinatra wasn't born rich, and was what you might call a self-made man. In this, too, he can be taken as a symbol, an emblem of the healthiest capitalism, the kind that rewards private initiative and personal values. Without wanting to get political, we can observe for him how true a reality highlighted by financial science is. The value of an asset is inversely proportional to its availability. How many Sinatras are there? Only one. And so this explains why our Frank is worth his weight in gold, and even more. Sinatra has always fought to stand out, as his Mars in the 10th house suggests. He was born in Hoboken, a small town in New Jersey, on December the 12th, 1915, at 3 in the morning. His parents were Italian immigrant workers, like tens of thousands of others, who emigrated to the United States at the dawn of this century. His mother became involved in politics, and he was raised by a Jewish neighbor. He wore pink clothes for a long time because his mother wanted a girl. He also wore a lot of pants, which earned him the nickname Pantalonoso, Pantsy, from the neighborhood thugs. He had a very tough childhood. The boys would tell him, "I'll throw up on you, you dirty little Italian," and he would bash their heads in with the knuckle dusters he always carried. In this we see various facets of his temperament. Mars in Leo opposite the moon, strength and aggressiveness. Scorpio Ascendant, which would be at the end of Libra but should clearly be considered the next sign. The Sun and Mercury in Sagittarius square Jupiter, a total lack of critical thinking, and a predisposition to exaggeration, to actions inflated by an overinflated ego. Intelligence is mediocre, a consequence of a lack of critical thinking, but on the other hand, courage is very strong, and there's even a hint of arrogance. The dominant of the chart is Neptune, which also explains his artistic sensibility. But why singing? Well, first of all, because he has the Sun in the 2nd house, which co-signifies the sign of Taurus, the super-singing sign par excellence. The Moon and Jupiter in the 5th house at birth are also symbols of artistic activity. Francesco, this is his real name, Sinatra began singing at a very young age. His musical idol was Bing Crosby. At 20, he played with 3 young men from Hoboken, and on September 8, 1935, they broadcast on the radio from the Capitol Theater in New York. On that occasion, thousands of calls came in to Murray Hill, 89983, calls supporting the quartet. On February 4th, 1939, he married Nancy, the first of his 4 wives. This marriage, like the 2 that followed, would soon fail. Venus at his birth was in the cold sign of Capricorn, in opposition to the equally frigid Saturn. La Voce was certainly unlucky in love, but this point must be clearly distinguished and understood. Love can be discussed from 2 essential perspectives, the institutional and the playful recreational. The horoscope shown in the figure shows that Sinatra was very satisfied with love as a form of entertainment, Moon and Jupiter in the 5th house, while he suffered and was a loser when it came to long-term relationships. He had many women, but mostly for short-term flings. His success continued with love, and at 24 he was already very famous with the song "I'll Never Smile Again." In just a few years, he had gone from earning $25 a week to $3,100, and as his singing successes grew, so did the number of flags in the photos of the women he liked. The chance to break through came in 1939, when Harry James, a famous conductor, heard him play. Then came a second Pygmalion in his career, Tommy Dorsey, another great musician. Then came the triumph. Here's what Gente wrote in a monograph dedicated to the singer. New Year's Eve 1942 was a memorable date in Sinatra's career. The Paramount Theater show hinged entirely on his performance, and the singer outdid himself. He was showered with applause, forced to repeatedly encore, while some fans in the audience fainted with excitement when he sang Ti aspetto and whispered Ti attesa in the chorus. The female audience shouted, Aspettami. That year, Sinatra earned around $1 billion lire. That day, Jupiter was trine to itself. Uranus and Neptune were 60 degrees from the midheaven. The years of his undying rise began. His records sold in the millions. The world we knew, over and over. Summer wind, something stupid. Tell her, it was a very good year. Somewhere in your heart. That's life, when somebody loves you. Meanwhile, his children, Nancy, Frank, and Christina, were born, bringing their father much joy. The fifth house is essentially well placed in the singer's birth chart, but they never managed to become big names in their fields of work as adults. In 1950, Sinatra met Ava Gardner and fell madly in love. This was enough to ruin his already shaky marriage to Nancy Barbato. The two married in November 1951, and theirs was a beautiful love story, even if it ended badly. The synastry wasn't exceptional, and so they broke up stormily. There's so much more to say about his relationships with the Kennedys and Reagan, about his Saturn in the ninth house, which meant he traveled relatively little, about Neptune on the midheaven, which may have signified alcohol and various excesses and so much more. But space is our tyrant, so let's end with a fantasy. Imagine a summer night, a terrace overlooking the sea, a full moon in the sky silvering the surface of the water, a light breeze carrying the scent of freshly painted boats, you with your significant other, hand in hand, and the sweet velvet of Frank's voice making you feel like strangers in the night. If Sinatra hadn't been born, something would be missing from the harmony of the world. Ciro Discepolo, from the book How to Discover the Secrets of a Horoscope. Albero Publishing, Milan, 1988.